based on prosecutorial misconduct. And you mentioned the striking black jurors, which is a massive violation. Were there any other instances? Because it seemed like from your reporting that that it sounded like the investigator for the prosecution was manipulating witnesses, drawing out false testimony. Did any of that the appeals, or was it mostly due that he kept repeatedly striking all the black jurors?
So a lot of what we found was cited in the appeal. So there was our jury analysis, which was cited in front of the court briefs to the U.S. Supreme Court, but back in the trial court, and also in some of the court briefs to the U.S. Supreme Court, but especially at the trial court level, our findings about the evidence in the case were cited extensively. So, for example, there is a guy who was clearly an alternate suspect in the case who had not been fully disclosed, it seems, to the defense, and that was very significant to the trial judge in the case, who ended up granting Curtis Flowers bail. There was a string of jailhouse informants, all of whom have reversed their testimony and said that they lied when they testified that Curtis had confessed to the murders. So there's just a lot of things that fell apart, and was either showing that the evidence was not solid or wasn't really evidence at all, or that there were things that the defense were not made aware of at the time of trial that clearly they should have been made aware of. And one of those most strikingly was this man, Willie James Hemphill, who there was just one sheet in the whole discovery about him. It was a form that this guy had signed, waiving his rights a couple days after the murders, and there was really very little about him. He said, "Oh yeah, I was arrested for that," and they questioned me, and they said people saw me on the street when murders happened in the morning of the murders, and by the way, when I walked into the police station or the law enforcement office, I was wearing shoes, which was interesting because there were bloody street prints on the murder scene made by Felix Granville's shoes. And so this is one example of this person who found his ultimate suspect, and he himself calls himself a suspect, and yet the defense really didn't know the full extent of the question or the fact that he had been arrested, and we ended up looking at some of those records about his arrest with both candidates. So there were a lot of things that we found out, and they all ended up mattering at different moments.
It's pretty incredible that the time we live in now, with our show, not nearly to the extent you have. I applaud you guys for the effort that you guys have put in. But we saw with Undisclosed, with an Anatayez case, and our work in Ed A's case, and you guys with Curtis Flowers, how podcasters are investigating these cases and findings are being heard before judges. In your case, the U.S. Supreme Court put a lot of the weight into overturning the decision based on things that you found through your investigative work.
We didn't consider the role in what they were considering, but a lot of what they were considering was really just the record in the jury. But our reporting of the court was here. What happened that very much more directly related to what we found. I mean, the question is, it was extremely surprising that the U.S. Supreme Court would grant cert in the case, and so it does seem like the publicity, perhaps, that the case had received, in part because our reporting may have influenced the court, but we just don't know. And for us as reporters, we don't go into our interest in this case back in 2017 and really throughout is how could Curtis Flowers come to be tried 6 times for the same crime? And as investigative reporters, what does this story say about the power of prosecutors in this country? So we never saw our job as trying to exonerate Curtis Flowers or prove that he didn't do it or prove that he did it. It was really focused on the actions of the prosecutor. And the prosecutor was really in many ways the main character in the story. And so we were frankly more than a little surprised to find out that the Supreme Court had granted cert in certain cases. And then at a certain point in this, after so many years of Curtis not winning, he suddenly started winning, and he's just been on a roll until, and all the way up to the end. Now he's completely done.
Did you ever end up having contact with him? As I said, I'm only into the 3rd episode of your series, and at that point you had mentioned that he was basically locked down and not allowed to speak to you. Were you ever, through the course of making the podcast, able to actually speak with Curtis?
Not through the main part of season 2. So the first time that I was able to talk to Curtis was when he walked out of jail in December and got out on bail. So so we did basically all the reporting for season 2 without being able to talk to him. His lawyer declined to make him available.
Were you there?
Natalie Jablonski, who's the producer on the show, and I were at the courthouse in hearing. Really didn't think he was going to get bail. I mean, at that point, this is still a death penalty case, and usually when you get a death penalty, a judge will think, well, I'm not going to let you out on bail because obviously the chances of you showing back up in this courtroom are minimal, if you could be executed. So it was pretty rare to see bail be granted in a death penalty case, but it happened. And then a couple hours later, he was released from jail. And in that moment, it did not really hit me in that moment, although there he was talking. As a reporter, you've got so much you're thinking about in those moments. We're recording it, you gotta ask questions, just making sure that we're doing our job. And then after we got out, later tonight, the family invited us over to his sister's house, and you hear from this in the episode of the podcast. And we had, this conversation with Curtis and his family, and that, I think, it was at that moment that it really with so many people in the story, including Curtis's family. So it was kind of but it was just a great scene where their sister was cooking like they always do, and there's Curtis's father joking around, but also there's Curtis, and it was just really strange moment. And then at that point, it really did seem like things were going in Curtis's favor. The fact that he got bail is, again, surprising. And at that point, it really did seem like, I don't know what the likelihood is that he ends up back behind bars once he's gotten out. I think he was really looking up for him at that point.
One of the